potentially slower vocabulary acquisition through only listening to English audiobooks as opposed to also reading. A couple of years ago, I decided to stop reading in primary time, which meant that I would basically not read or spend any time on reading, but instead use secondary time as a reading time, which is by me defined, or I have this frame of thinking where I say, okay, I do a certain activity, and if I additionally can listen to audiobooks in this activity, I call the audiobooks listening secondary time. And the thing I'm doing actually is the primary time. And the rule I have made up is about 90%. If the audiobook listening doesn't decrease the efficiency of the primary activity by 90%, then this is okay. Otherwise, I have to stop listening to the audiobook. Now, I actually probably have more of a 95% rule, or I just stop whenever I think it has a negative impact. But nonetheless, what now has been, I think, a kind of effect is that I know often words, and I know how the words sound, but I don't know how to write them. Because what I miss is just seeing the words. And with language, especially now in my case in the English language, it seems to be quite useful to also know how to write these words because, well, it is not my mother tongue, and so it would be useful to have more samples basically, to see the same words again and again and again, and instead of listening to the same word maybe 100 times, also to see it every now and then. So often when making videos, for example, I often have a word in mind, but I don't know how to read it, and because I don't know how to read it, because I only know how to say it and maybe potentially also how to use it, but I don't know how it is actually spelled out. So if I don't know how it is spelled out, I also cannot access the rules I also learned at school about how to pronounce certain words. And so of course there are also edge cases, but nonetheless, or irregular cases, but nonetheless I then often say the words probably wrong because I can only remember them from hearing. So I think to a certain extent, if one switches this, or one uses this switch to audiobook listening instead of, in my case, it mostly entirely replaced primary reading. I basically never read primary up, or I did not up until a couple of months ago, where I sat down in the library and would every now and then read. I also have to say that for studying, I do have primary reading time. It is just the kind of casual reading time where I just listen books that have not been written mostly for an academic purpose, but more like for a common purpose, one could say, which one could call fact books, but they are not meant for an academic purpose usually.